you need to make sure that you're creating a space on your personal branding that most people that will hire you are comfortable working with you after they've seen that side of you.
Hey, Team Edgar community, welcome back. Today, we're really excited to be joined by Tyler, who is actually a voice actor who has some cool perspectives on social media that he's going to share with us. So I'm going to pass it over to Tyler real quick just to introduce himself, to explain a little bit about what voice acting is, and then we'll get into some of the ways that he uses social media to help land auditions and treats it as an actual business. So Tyler, go right ahead.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it, Megan. So basically, I've been in voice acting for a couple of years, and I always loved using my voice for different things, different accents, different this, different that, character impressions. But then I started in radio broadcasting, so I went to school for radio, but I realized I didn't want to be a disc jockey because to me it felt somewhat, not a knock to disc jockeys, but it felt somewhat disingenuous, if it makes sense. And so I actually talked to my prof, and he said, well, do you want to do, voice work and stuff? So he talked me out of being an announcer. He said, you're going to actually learn stuff that you will then have to unlearn down the road if you want to sound more conversational, more genuine. So I took the creative pathway. So I learned to write and production and whatnot. But after a couple of years abroad of doing none of that, just living in Australia and Southeast Asia, I came back and I was like, I want to do this full time. And it's not easy. And a large portion of voice actors don't do this full time. They do it as an addendum to another job, whether they're an artist, a visual artist, they could be in a band, they could be doing reception work, they could be doing anything. And in their free time, they're auditioning. So voice acting is a very kind of broad thing. And there's so many different facets to it. There's a lot of student jobs, independent stuff, and there's a lot of free unpaid opportunities, which is good. But at the same time, if you're getting companies that are making money off of your voice, as opposed to just showing off something like an animation project or whatever, it's kind of a slippery slope. So it's a real challenge to find good opportunities where people are willing to pay you what you're worth, as opposed to trying to nickel and dime you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It must be a fascinating world to navigate out there. And one of the things that I find so cool is that we actually met through LinkedIn, through shared connection. And I think it's really a great way that you're using social media to network with different people. Can you explain a little bit about how social media helps you make these connections, how you're using it in a way to get your brand out there and actually land jobs for yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of started in a very small community place nearby, and I didn't know a lot of people, so I met in person with some people. And what a lot of people don't know is there's a good portion of the voice acting community, it's very supportive. And so it's like, oh, join this group, join that group, join this group. So there's groups that I'm on Facebook, and I've managed to find some opportunities through there, whether it's people, they don't know where to find voice actors, so they'll go to this group and they'll say, hey, I have this job, send me your auditions, send me a demo, send me a resume. But there's a lot of different communities that I like to use. There's a couple pay-to-play sites, actually. I wouldn't call them necessarily social media, but you have to pay a yearly membership just to get the opportunity to audition. So there's nothing guaranteed, which is tough. But LinkedIn I find really great because you can use it for free and you can connect to so many people. You need to know specifically the type of people you're trying to connect with as well, because there's a lot of people that will just send out connections with, there's no message saying what they might want from you or what they want with the connection. It's just them pressing connect and then moving on, going to the next person, pressing connect. So you definitely have to go in with a mindset of you want to offer something to this person, as well as them offering you something in the long run with a connection. So yes, we met through a friend, Megan Grant, and she does a really good job of teaching us how to source leads properly. And you don't want to waste anybody's time, right? So get to the point relatively quickly when it comes to LinkedIn and when it comes to connecting. And outside of LinkedIn and the Facebook, I also use Reddit a little bit. although it's more anonymous, and there aren't very good quality opportunities, but you can connect with people and communicate with people. And there are some other smaller acting sites that I've met fellow voice actors with. I met a guy, he's in New York, a voice actor, and he does a spot on John Mulaney impression, among many other ones. And he has like 500,000 followers on TikTok now. So he's using TikTok and Instagram to gain his following. I stay away from TikTok because of all the back end stuff and all that. You know, it's questionable. But I need to use Instagram more as well. I've heard things, but you have to constantly create content too. So a lot of my time is spent auditioning or making connections on LinkedIn. I usually do 60 auditions a week, which dropped a bit with COVID. I was doing 90 a week. It's also a low, not approval rate, but it's a low rate of landing the auditions that you do. So it's a lot of rejection and a lot of putting your head down, sending, and then forgetting that thing ever existed. So it's a mindset as well.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. There are a couple of things that I would love just to highlight here that I think you could take no matter what industry you're in, is this idea of leading with value. Tyler mentioned the fact that you don't want to bury your lead, you know? He's got like a really amazing thing he wants to tell someone, perhaps in a DM on Instagram or on LinkedIn. Put that front and center when you're reaching out, and don't waste people's times. Don't make them read through paragraphs of introducing yourself. I think we do a lot of setup when we're doing that one-on-one communication sometimes, when we all know we're so busy. So get that punch right away and get that in the lead. That's a really cool way to do it. And just with personal branding, regardless of the industry you're in, Tyler is 100% right. You need to personal brand in a way that you're producing content throughout your entire day. And I think a lot of the time we feel like we don't have enough content to do that, but get creative with what's going on throughout your day and look for the little lessons and the tips that you can learn. Like, I'm sure you have productivity things that you do that you might find so simple and boring, but other people might not have thought to them, and you could change someone's day for the better by bringing that for the forefront and just making that piece of content and getting it brave and putting it out there. So I think those are really cool things. As well as just this idea of playing the long game. If you're meeting people on Reddit and on LinkedIn, perhaps they can't offer you guys value right away, but what could they bring to you maybe a couple of months down the road when they perhaps need a voiceover actor in a couple of months? They'll think of you because you've laid the foundation then. So even if you feel like you're not in an industry that you need to be promoting yourself on social media, take a lesson from Tyler in this way, that he's laying the groundwork now that's truly going to set himself up for online marketing and networking success. So I think that's super cool. So I would love for you just to dive in a little bit more to what kind of content you feel like for your personal brand is working well on these networks. What do you create to kind of get your name out there and just continue to have a presence to stay top of mind for people?
Sure. I think that my brand is very playful and friendly. The logo on my website is a cartoon woodchuck talking into a microphone, and my last name is pronounced Herchuck. So my kind of slogan branding is, how much voice could a Herchuck voice? So it's very playful and cute. And I've actually just gotten feedback off that saying, I love that. That's great. You know, and so I try to be very conversational and friendly. And I'm not a voice in a suit. I'm, you know, just a smiley, friendly guy next door. And so I don't like to beat around the bush and throwing out numbers and stats and whatnot, and just say, you know, if you need a voice, if you need a friendly voice, if you need something to connect with your young audience or your youthful audience, I can do that for you. And it's always what I can offer them as opposed to what they can offer me. I find that a lot of people kind of go the other way around, saying, hey, you know, it doesn't always work the way that you want it to work. But I found a lot of the connections that I make, they'll say, well, we don't need any voice stuff right now, but we'll let you know, which can be, you know, it can be 6 months later, you know, you get something. One of the websites I use on a subscription basis to audition, I just got a notification saying today that looks like I booked something through them, and I auditioned back in March and I heard nothing. So it took them, you know, 5 months to decide who they wanted to use. So a lot of it, like you had mentioned, is laying the groundwork, just letting people know that you're there. And so I started a website relatively early before I didn't really have content to put onto it, but I slowly added content over time. And just showing people that you're serious by having a website, by having different social medias, by filling out profiles on pages that you might not use, but your audience might use. So you may not even have to be constantly posting stuff out there, but if you have an Instagram page, once in a while post something, but show that you have a presence there, because your audience may be there and they may 6 months down the road message you and say, hey, what can you do for me, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons you're probably pretty successful is what I keep hearing from you is you put your audience first. Even if you don't like consuming content on a certain network, you know your audience might be there, so you have to have a presence there. Or even in the fact that you have your tagline centered around what you can do to help people is a subtle shift that I think a lot of people could take a look at in their own kind of, what's your 3-second elevator pitch? Does it actually focus on the other person, or is it focusing too much on what you do rather than how you help that person? So I think that's a really smart way to give people a really great sense that they're still the hero of their story, and an easy way to talk about your brand to get word of mouth marketing out there. So this has been a really cool discovery chat, especially for other people who are out there in these industries that you might not think that social media can help you. Just looking at this in a sense of a voice actor personally branding and making a business out of it, I think is super great. So I would love you just to leave us with a couple other thoughts, whether it's about kind of developing a personal brand, using social media, or just starting your own kind of voice acting business in general for our community.
Sure. I find that social media is really good for keeping yourself accountable, whether it's for what you're doing on a regular basis, whether it's for making sure you don't say anything too ridiculous. A couple years back, I made the shift to doing this full time and making this my profession. And so I don't post, unnecessary things on Facebook or on Instagram. I post the occasional social or personal thing, but I try to keep it business related. And because I'm doing that, I'm probably less likely to get canceled down the road, right? So you need to make sure that you're creating a space on your personal branding that most people that will hire you are comfortable working with you after they've seen that side of you. And I find that social media in general is very beneficial just for keeping in touch with people that you may not ever work with, but they may turn around and say, hey, you're a voice actor. I have this other person that I got in touch with that they need that thing, or even just educating people. There's some e-learning developers that I've connected with on LinkedIn who are just starting, or they've been in the industry for a little while, and they say, well, we don't need your voice right now, but I've always wondered about voice acting. What can you tell me about that? And so a lot of it can be education. It can be showing people a side of the industry that they don't know. And I mentioned earlier before we started recording is that a lot of people think that voice acting is something that you can just drop into and get started, whether it's your mom saying you've got a great voice, or somebody at work saying you do the closing announcements really well. So you have to realize that, again, it's a lot of work, right? I think the industry average rather, is 1 in every 200 auditions becomes a job, right? So that's a huge number. Now, depending on where you're finding your work in voice acting, can increase your numbers. I have an agent that's local to me, and so I book 1 in every 20 things through him. Whereas the online subscription site I use, there's a huge community of tens of thousands of other voice actors, and I'll book 150. So it really varies. And I'm not getting paid for the auditions I do, right? So you have to realize that when you're doing so much that money isn't coming in when you're auditioning, you need to play the long game, right? And you can't just sit on your laurels and just kind of wait and be like, oh, I don't need to do any auditions today or tomorrow. So you're constantly doing stuff, and you have to do it quick too. If you don't do it quick, the amount of competition, somebody else is going to jump in. And then top of mind, they may only listen to the first 20 auditions. And if you didn't get in time, you're not going to get listened to and you're not going to get hired. So.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And like I said, just taking this into whatever industry you're in, I think that these tips are really transferable. So I really appreciate your wisdom and time today sharing your story, Tyler. Guys, if you want to learn more about Tyler, I'm going to put the links in the description of this video where you can find out a little bit more about him. And thank you so much again for your time today.
Thanks so much, Megan. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for tuning in, and be sure to keep the conversation going with us on social. We're at Meet Edgar on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So let us know your biggest takeaway from today's episode, and don't forget to tag us. Visit www.meetedgar.com and start a free trial to up-level your social media marketing strategy today. Happy posting!